Now, how do we treat, aside from sanitary landfill, municipal solid waste? So we have what we call incineration. Although RA 8749 have highlighted that incineration is already banned. And there is a provision that indicates that incineration would only be done for biomedical waste. So that's an exception to the rule. So nowadays, if it is just simply a municipal solid waste with a characteristic which is like that of your solid waste coming from your residential houses, incineration is not applicable. Although for biomedical waste, as we will discuss also in the hazardous waste, they have to have this engineering design or operations wherein they have water wall. What's the water wall? This is constructed in the combustion chamber to control the temperature. So, for example, if you have the incinerator like this, in order to avoid the pollution that will be produced by the incineration for the same reason that it is being banned, it's actually designed with water wall. So this is the water wall. So what's the purpose of the water wall class? As you have learned when we discuss volatile organic compounds such as dioxins and furans, when you burn a plastic, these are the persistent organic pollutants that will be produced. Now, the reason why they are called persistent organic pollutants is that they exist at very, very high temperature. Now, the more you heat them, the more they intensify their structure as well as concentration. So, in order to modulate or to control it, you have to have what we call water wall. So, that's the purpose of the water wall. So, what happens is that the temperature will be controlled. Heat will be absorbed to provide hot water for steam, and this would also be needed in order to avoid incomplete combustion. So the incomplete combustion would give you, as we have learned in air, the soot as well as the carbon monoxide, which would add up to the air emission. So this is how an incineration goes or being operated in the industry in order to avoid this risk. Now, another engineering part or modification for incineration to avoid this risk would be the collection of ash. So, the ash here are collected. Why? Because definitely, in order for the incineration to occur, you need to have coal. So, as mentioned a while ago in our discussion in energy, your coal, when burned, would also have some inorganic pollutants such as heavy metals. So these should be collected and then these should be immobilized so as not to be considered as solid waste. If you recall what was discussed in the plant visit yesterday, the industries which promote hazardous waste are not allowed to bring in the waste. Only those which are characterized as solid waste or municipal solid waste are only allowed to be dumped in the sanitary landfill. So there must be a proper treatment prior to the disposal to the sanitary landfill. So the same thing with the ash coming from incineration. It has to be immobilized first prior to the dumping to the solid waste. Now, this is the composting process that I was talking about. So normally, composting is done aerobically, and it has to be done with certain thermophilic bacteria. Namely, you have here Bacillus, Clostridium, and Pseudomonas. Thermophilic because the compost has to maintain, or the composting process has to be maintained at 60 degrees Celsius and should be maintained for at least 3 days in order to destroy pathogenic microorganisms. So let me reiterate, when you do your composting, it's not simply digging a hole at your backyard and then just covering it. You have to maintain these conditions. In order for you to create a better compost, what is the purpose of having a compost? Number one, you can use it as a soil conditioner or a fertilizer. So this is the moisture content that has to be maintained, as well as why you have to steer also your composting process. The anaerobic condition are allowed to be released. So even if it's aerobically done, if at some point you don't steer it, you also create anaerobic condition. But from time to time, it has also to be released in order to maintain the aerobic process. Okay. Now, is composting always acceptable? The answer is no. Why? Because number one, if you don't maintain the process, you create more possibilities of risk, specifically for pathogens. They may be carriers of vermins and other pathological illnesses. Number two, your market. What's the purpose of composting if you don't have a market? So you have to have your market for the compost that you will be producing. And it has to be made sure that the quality of your solid waste being composted are only degradable ones. Otherwise, the compost will now be with the composition of unnecessary or inappropriate solid waste, such as the glass, the plastics, and metals, which would add to the risk on the environment. Okay, what other conversion processes can be utilized for MSW or municipal solid waste? You have the following. So you may have also fluidized bed. We have discussed already incineration, wet oxidation, and then pyrolysis. All of these class are thermal decomposition or oxidation processes. We will discuss this further when you go to CHE 185. I just want to show you how these are how are municipal solid waste being treated in the industry. Another type of process of treating the solid waste are the biological processes. So you may have an aerobic digestion. Normally, this is with the utilization of digesters, as we have discussed a while ago.